Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Friday, July 15th installment of the Silicon Insider, the only uncensored look at life and business in the Valley. My name is Mike Malone, and I'm here with special contributor Scott Budman, technology reporter for NBC Bay Area. Our producer is Jordan Henderson. Our East Coast correspondent is Bob Grove. And as always, our host is the Silicon Valley Business Journal. Okay, Scott, I feel like we're living with that old curse, or within that old curse of living in interesting times. I mean, this has not been a good news week in most cases. We have one really good piece of news, but otherwise, geez, it's getting messy. It's getting scary.
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about the overall economy, yeah, it's kind of the cloud hanging over everything with inflation on the rise. People are talking about interest rates going up. Housing prices are still high. We haven't had, the big round of layoffs. I know that's what everybody is waiting for, but everybody we talk to say they're feeling some sort of financial pressure right now.
Yeah, and looking back, I mean, we're now at 9.1% interest. I think the producers index hit 11,
right,
which is scary. I think at the peak of the Carter inflation, it was what, 13%, and that 13% was different from our 11 or 9% right now because wages were rising, even as inflation was climbing. Wages aren't really going up right now. So we are falling behind faster than we did 40 years ago.
Yeah, and even with a big pullback in stock prices, the tech industry has so far been kind of protected from this, but I don't know how long that will last. And if you're an employer of any sector now, including tech, I think you're nervous because that's often the next shoe to drop. And we're likely to see, and by the time this goes out there, our conversation, the Fed may have already come back and raised interest rates yet again. It'll be interesting to see if that does pull the brake on the economy or just cause people, let's say, who are in debt to have higher credit card debt rates and student debt rates, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I think, with these kinds of numbers, though, I mean, this last month, the news this week was pretty crazy and scary that half point interest rate jumps, 3/4 of a point. I'm not sure, no matter how quickly they do it, they can pull the string now on the recession, and fight it. I think they have to do something pretty major, almost unprecedented. And that's going to throw the economy in another loop. Yeah, this is not a great time. And, meanwhile, Sonny Balwani, your trial finally finished. I should mention last week, we recorded on Thursday because you were told that it looked like the jury verdict was going to come in on Friday. Then in the course of doing the show last Thursday, you got a message that the jury had come back in. Is that correct?
It is, yeah. They came in Thursday. Right. Yeah. And so we all rushed to the courthouse, and maybe this is your one piece of good news you were referring to, but yeah, the Balwani
Well, I got
trial.
another one.
Oh, okay, another one. Not good news for Sonny Balwani. And, they ran the table on the guy. He was found guilty of all 12 counts of fraud, conspiracy, fraud against investors, fraud against patients. So interesting to contrast, and you can't help but contrast his verdicts against those of Elizabeth Holmes, his partner and the CEO of Theranos. She was found guilty on 4 counts. He was found guilty on 12 counts. And will that affect their sentences? We'll know in October and November when they get sentenced.
How does the COO get 12 counts and the intimately involved CEO only gets 4?
According to what the jurors said, and this goes back to what the jurors said in the Holmes case, they were able to link Elizabeth Holmes, and we heard the phone call multiple times where she lied to investors. So that's the fraud of investors. But they did not put her in the lab with the machines, which were ironically her idea, you could say, right? But they didn't link her to the labs, and therefore they didn't link her to the patients for the patient fraud. Those people who were told they had diseases when they didn't. And we thought in the back of our minds, many of us covering the case, I wonder if that shield between Elizabeth Holmes and the patients was indeed Sonny Balwani, who was known to run the labs. And sure enough, the jury, which was a different jury, obviously, for him, the jury found him not only culpable for the investor fraud and conspiracy to commit investor fraud with Holmes, but also the 4 counts of patient fraud. And so they linked him not only to the money, but to the labs. So it was really his fingerprints all over that company. And it proved probably that the Svengali defense and having Elizabeth Holmes come to the stand was a masterstroke in keeping her count level down.
Yeah, somehow she came out the damsel in distress on all this, handled by the manipulative, ever manipulative Sunny Balwani, and yet she presented herself as a technical expert. It was her idea, it was her company.
Right, and yet a technical expert
somehow didn't know what was going on in the lab.
And that is a feat of, that was quite the feint, but it worked. And
good lawyer,
her claims of abuse were backed up both by testimony during the Balwani case of employees who pointed the finger at Sunny Balwani and said he was an abusive boss. But also, and again, obviously the jurors are not supposed to be watching television and consuming media, but that show, The Dropout, was dropped on Hulu literally during his trial. And it showed him, which Bad Blood, the book, originally did as well, as an abusive boss. And so this whole image of Balwani, who had been silent up to that point, none of us had interviewed him, was of the sort of backroom mastermind, writing checks and abusing people along the way. And that came out in court.
Did he take the stand?
He did not.
He did not.
No.
Interesting. There's a fundamental difference between the 2 trials.
Absolutely. I think the fundamental difference. We didn't get to know Sunny Balwani, and the portrait that was portrayed by the prosecution was of a bully, and he didn't do anything in the defense to dissuade that.
So when's the sentencing?
His sentencing is in November. Hers is in October.
Okay. I was thinking about this last night, thinking about you. You've spent much of a year in the courtroom, and now we have the next big story I want to bring up, which may put you back in the courtroom, a civil court this time, for a year. I mean, you're the technology reporter covering Silicon Valley for NBC, and your life has become courtroom reporter covering all of the shenanigans of Silicon Valley.
Did not see that happening, right? I know you're talking about Elon Musk and Twitter now, right?
Elon walks out on the Twitter deal, claiming that Twitter lied about the number of bots it had, how many real accounts it had, etc. Twitter says it's going to sue. It's going to force Elon to buy the company, which is kind of a weird, thing. You sue somebody to marry you. And if he doesn't, he has to pay $1 billion.
At least. I mean, it's interesting. And I think you hit the overall arching weirdness of this is that, Elon was very excited about buying Twitter, and then he wasn't. And Twitter is saying, wait a minute, that excitement is, and therefore that lack of excitement is costing us and our shareholders a lot of money. We're going to sue you to make good on that promise, a contractually binding promise. Yeah. So now they're going to court. But you're right. Ultimately, Twitter is trying to get somebody that doesn't want to own Twitter to own Twitter. And that's a weird thing. But maybe it doesn't come down to that. Maybe there is just enough financial remuneration to make some of these investors whole. But that's really what it comes down to, is a huge disparity in what Twitter is worth now versus what Twitter is worth on paper by Musk's contract. And that's what they're going to court over. And you're right. I mean, is it really going to be decided by bots? I mean, come on, this feels like his lawyers need to find something a little more concrete in order to scotch this deal. But that's just me. I'm not a lawyer.
Well, I've heard 2 points of view, both coming from legal experts. One of them is Elon's going to have to go through with the deal, that the bots thing is not materially enough important to cancel the contract, okay, the deal. The other point of view, though, is that the bots are sufficient, and the mistake that Twitter made on the deal, the contract, was they didn't insert an additional statement that Twitter shareholders could also sue for damages.
But Twitter shareholders have sued. That's actually a different lawsuit filed also here in the Bay Area on behalf of the shareholders, not the employees, but the shareholders of Twitter, because many of them bought in. I thinking, hey, this is about to go to $54.20 a share based on the $44 billion buyout. And now Musk is trying to get out of that deal. And these people are left holding undervalued shares. And so there are lawsuits flying all over the place here.
Yeah, there's maybe I'm just not getting it, but the argument I believe was a class action, and they would be part of this particular case by Twitter. I mean, there's something about the Twitter lawyers missed that part, while Elon's looks like he's using his lawyers to dummy up a case that Twitter misrepresented itself. And I think it's going to come down to discovery. Does Twitter really want discovery on the truth about how many real life users they actually have?
I mean, don't they have to be honest about that as a publicly traded company? So we know their numbers haven't been spectacular, but they've been, they're a certain segment that they run the show when it comes to where you get your news online. But as far as social networks go, they don't have nearly as many as, say, a Facebook or a TikTok or a YouTube.
But people have said this puts Facebook in an interesting situation too, if they have to admit how many empty accounts they have. I mean, I don't think Twitter has to go down that granularity where it says this many are bots, this many are unused dead accounts, blah, blah, blah. They can just say we have this many, accounts in use at this moment. And I think if they have to show the real numbers, it's going to be shocking, both at Twitter and at Facebook, and probably TikTok too.
Yeah, and you're right. This may be the sort of bot moment, how many there are, how easy they are to create, and frankly, how damaging they can be, which we've seen and talked about before. But is that going to actually end the deal? Is that enough to end the deal? We've known about bots for a long time. We've known that they're a pain. Musk has talked about them. Twitter has talked about them. If it really just comes down to his number versus the company's number, that would almost be disappointing, but maybe that's enough. I don't know. It just seemed that the contract was fairly ironclad and that Musk should have done his due diligence before signing a contract saying, I'm going to buy your company. And to come back and say, well, now I can't do it because what? Bots? That seems to be thin.
Yeah, it does. It seems very thin. It seems like he realized he's got a pig in the poke and he's trying to get away as fast as he can. And I think there's probably a good reason why he doesn't want to do this deal now. And that is, Bob Grove sent me this, the 8 richest tech leaders in the American economy lost more than $250 billion year to year over 2021. And Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos were apparently particularly hard hit. I mean, you're the richest man in the world, but losing, tens of billions of dollars, you don't have to switch to, less expensive cereal in the morning, but it may make you hesitate to spend $40+ billion on a company that isn't doing that well. And the more you know about it, the worse it looks.
Right. I mean, the billionaires lost all that money because the tech stocks took a hit. And because the tech stocks took a hit, Twitter, which for a while seemed like a really good buy at $54.20, like he was getting away with not all that much of a premium.
Yeah.
Now, the $44 billion price tag seems quite high. I mean, today, as of this time when you and I speak, their valuation is under $28 billion. A significant difference. And I think that is even buoyed higher by the fact that some people believe this deal might get done. So Twitter, like every tech stock, really, really got hit. And all of a sudden, $44 billion seems like an overpayment. But does that mean the deal is off? I don't know if you can, end a deal simply because what seemed like a good deal at the time now doesn't seem so good.
If I go down and I get hoodwinked into buying a timeshare, I can usually get out of the contract if I throw lawyers at it, right? I mean, can't you get out of a deal if it's not fully consummated? I mean, if you want your money back, that's one thing, but signing a deal that shows your intent, how far can you go to hold that person to that agreement?
I mean, really, I think the reason this is watched so closely is not just because of the drama that has to do with Elon Musk and Twitter, but really people are saying, hey, a contract, what does that mean? If you sign a contract to do something and then say, I no longer want to do it, and really don't give me the whole bot excuse. I no longer want to do it because the money isn't as good as it was. Can you just walk or even pay $1 billion breakup fee? Are there going to be deals in the future where companies or individuals back out simply because, well, I know I signed a contract, but ... I mean, this could open up a lot of.
Now translate that to the student loan situation.
Well, I mean, but so
I
far,
signed a contract for that student loan, right? That's the argument. How can we retire student loans when all these individuals have signed contracts?
right? But I think if the government steps in and says we no longer need to collect your money, then the people who owe the money can say, wow, that's a great gift, and let's end this contract. But Twitter is not saying we don't want the contract. They're saying we like this contract.
Yeah.
It's a good lucrative contract for us, so we're sticking with it. It's the guy who signed the contract that's saying, not so sure anymore. And I don't know how business operates if you don't value and honor those contracts.
So if Twitter turns to Elon and says 10 billion to get out of this, think Elon would take it?
It's hard to say. I mean, I doubt that Elon would just take it. But look, okay, so 28 billion, let's round up for Twitter, versus 44 billion. That's a difference of $16 billion. If they say something in that range to make the investors at least whole, and then, hey, you don't have to run Twitter, you don't have to worry about this, but you did say 44 billion. And this is the difference between where we are now and 44 billion. Does he take that and walk away? It's a huge chunk of change to not get anything in return. But that may be what he's on the hook for, as opposed to just $1 billion breakup fee, right?
You know, you're going to be sitting in a superior court or federal court somewhere for the next 6 months to a year.
You think I'm going to Delaware for this? The Delaware Chancery Court?
Will they hold it in Delaware?
I don't know. I honestly don't know how this works.
Two California entities, well, I guess they're a Texas entity now, but I don't think they want to be in Texas.
No, they don't want to be in Texas. I think the Delaware thing comes in because that's where Twitter is technically.
Yeah, they're all registered.
Right. So I don't know, but we'll find out. And there's obviously, like you say, there are a few ways to even avoid this going to court. But I think those ways involve Elon Musk writing a big check. And apparently that's exactly what he doesn't want to do. And
I think it's going to set precedent on contract law.
I agree.
Okay. Let's see. Those 8 billionaires losing all of that money. I know. Bob Grove sent me a note saying this reminds him it's Zuckerberg. Zuckerberg with all of his lost money, Meta, and the metaverse and all that. Grove says, and I'd forgotten this, it reminds him of John Scully and the Apple Newton, where he has a vision of what will be. He knows it's coming. He's throwing huge amounts of money at it, but he may be just ahead of the curve. They couldn't make the Newton viable. I mean, it was an interesting little device, but it wasn't something you had to have. They come back just a few years later with the iPhone, and they changed mankind. Is this Zuckerberg's? Is he doing the Ahab thing where he's just pursuing this white whale and losing money, huge sums of money in the process, trying to realize his vision, and he just can't do it?
Yeah, I mean, isn't that sort of the in Silicon Valley lore, the General Magic story, right? They had all this technology, none of it worked at the time, or none of it was bought at the time, and then it turned out that so much of it ended up in the universe, as it were. It's sort of like what Star Trek would do. Eventually, we ended up doing in the real world.
We have other stories like that. Gene Amdahl, one of the great computer scientists, starts Trilogy to build the ultimate chip and to actually beat Moore's law, and the thing just destroys itself, and the company's out of business, in just a matter of months after raising hundreds of millions of dollars. But he was obsessed with the idea that he could flank everybody else.
Yeah, I mean, the only difference perhaps between Zuckerberg and the rest of that is Zuckerberg isn't spending all the money on this. Clearly, he's smart enough to know, let's keep Instagram going, let's keep Facebook going, let's keep WhatsApp going. They're cash cows, and their earnings and their revenue numbers keep coming in profitably. And so he's not, you could say he's betting the company on the metaverse, which is, I agree, a big black hole of spending that we don't know is going to work yet. And we even have, examples, Second Life, of companies that have tried this before and have failed. So if I were a Facebook shareholder, which I'm not, or an employee, I would be glad for the stuff that's still working. But yeah, I'd be worried about Zuckerberg's passion and determination to get this metaverse thing working, because it's costing billions of dollars. And so far, it's potentially the technology of the future, or the meeting room of the future, or the gaming platform of the future, but it's just not there yet. And that's what would worry me. And that's different from, hey, Musk wants to add a truck to the lineup, or, you know what I mean? Netflix wants to add a different advertising sponsored tier to the lineup. He's really changing the focus of the platform, and we just don't know that it's going to work.
Yeah, well, we'll talk about Netflix in a second, but didn't we talked about this before? That, I mean, Sheryl Sandberg leaving was kind of a shock. But then when you found out that one of the reasons she was leaving was because she was shut out of all of the discussions about the metaverse and all of that, I got kind of a sinking feeling in my stomach that you've got the one adult in the room and you're kind of keeping her out of the conversation, like you're trying to get away with something. And when mom isn't looking, I mean, it kind of made me a little bit even more nervous about all this.
Right. And what was she famous for? Revenue generation, selling ads. And perhaps they said, hey, we're just not ready to do that. And she's got to say, wait a minute, the clock is ticking. We're a public company. We have to report quarterly earnings every 3 months. We can't spend and sink billions and billions of dollars into something with no plan on how we're going to get some of that money back. I imagine she was very frustrated whenever the metaverse came up, and whether they pushed her out or she eventually decided this is just not going to work on that level, i.e. profit. I can see where they split. I mean, she was all about the bottom line and made Facebook very successful because of it. And so now you've got, the geeks at play, but where's the bottom line? Where's the promise? And that's why shareholders, I think, have gotten understandably nervous.
Look, I have a rule about covering Silicon Valley, and I'm sure you formulated the same one, which is there's only a finite number of true winners in this town, scientists, executives, and that sort of thing. And you follow them wherever they go, and success follows them. And no matter when they leave a place, no matter what their excuse, I want to spend more time with my kids, I'm interested in other things, I'm going back to school, that company is going to start getting in trouble. And she was one of those people that I've tracked through their career, that they bring success with them. And success oftentimes leaves when these people go. Do you feel that way about Facebook?
I mean, to an extent, but I would say that, Sheryl Sandberg left Google and they didn't crater right when she left. I mean, they were fine. But I do think she was even more instrumental in building Facebook. And yeah, I think there is, for all of the, Sheryl wasn't relevant anymore or whatever chatter, the fact is she leaving a company is really bad news for that company, period, end of story. Especially if that company is trying to get into a brand new way of doing things that costs a whole lot of money and that could be a huge revenue stream. So when they get rid of the person who generates all that revenue, well, that's just a weird combination that is not healthy for a company. And so, yeah, you're losing your talented person. You're losing your number two, who maybe should have been number one. But, perhaps most importantly, she was the one that generated all that money. And now you've got what is essentially a money pit, and you've 86 the person that turns those things into profitable enterprises. So it doesn't make sense. And I think it's a double loss for Facebook right now. They're going through something that is unproven, and they're doing it without their revenue generator.
Okay, well, speaking of revenue generating and ads and all of that, Netflix and Microsoft, this is from Jordan. Netflix and Microsoft announce an ad partnership. And he asks, is this an early sign that Netflix is increasing cloud service usage with Azure? What do you think?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's also, remember, Netflix was, very, very determined not to sell ads. And
Yeah.
what I was looking for in the announcement that we got with Netflix and Microsoft was the headline, free Netflix. Here's how you do it. And
Yeah.
they didn't do that.
It is a
So
step.
we have to wait, right? So this isn't a blockbuster move just to say Netflix, which already told us they were going to sell ads at some point.
Yeah.
They admitted they have to do that. I mean, their stock is cratered. They're really struggling right now with a lot of competition, but they're still
Take an
Netflix.
active step towards that
Yes.
vision of the future of free Netflix.
Yes, but what subscribers, and I count myself among them, want to know is, how will this affect what we spend each month? And one of the joys of streaming is the ad-free stuff. Netflix doesn't have ads. And so you just have to sort of weigh the two. I tried Hulu on one of those, inexpensive things with ads because I wanted to watch the Dropout, the Elizabeth Holmes Theranos thing. And you know what? It was a little, okay, there's an ad. All right, there's a couple ads. And it was interesting because now I'm asking myself, because I cover this stuff, are they targeting me? I noticed a lot of the ads were for college things, and I got a high schooler. Are they looking at, do they know this? It's, whatever. You sort of get into that paranoid thing. But the bottom line was it took a little bit longer to watch the Dropout.
Yeah.
Because,
and did you ever have that experience? You got used to watching Netflix and you turn on Hulu and all of a sudden an ad hits and
Right.
you're like pissed off.
Well,
And the other thing is I worry about is mission creep, which we see now with YouTube, where it used to be a quick ad, then it's, oh, you got to watch this for 30 seconds. And now they have a second one and they have a countdown on that one. And okay, let's get back to the song.
right.
And then boom, you got 5 more seconds of a car ad. And you can just see this thing creeping into commercial television.
And I think
it's there.
that's going to be a big differentiator on how we watch Netflix. Some people are going to say, okay, 15 a month seems like a lot, but boy, I just want to stream my, Stranger Things or whatever movie or, all that thing. Whereas the ad thing is going to be less expensive. People would have to get used to, how people watch television way back in the day and still do now with advertising, less advertising. I'm obviously very biased towards that. It pays my salary, but at the same time, even my own kids, if you're a teenager, you've grown up in the Netflix era, and other than the news, if you're watching the news or the Super Bowl or I don't know, the Olympics, you don't see ads. I mean, I watched my children grow up and occasionally see an ad and are like, whoa, what's that? And the other would say, well, that's an advertisement trying to sell us something, we don't like it, and I jump in and say, wait a minute, that pays the rent here, But I mean, ads are something that a whole generation has gotten used to not seeing. So it's a new concern for Netflix to say, the reason we succeeded is this, and now we're going to kind of go against it. And that might be tough.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up with Top 30 radio, and the DJs didn't run an ad halfway through Hey Jude. You got to listen to the whole thing. YouTube now, you got to stop for an ad in the middle of a song, and I fear that's Netflix's future. We're getting it everywhere now.
Yeah, it's true, but I think what we're getting everywhere is the choice. Whether it's on Hulu, you have a choice. You have the ad-free choice. I think Netflix will certainly keep its ad-free choice. And so it's almost like you've got the diamond lane and you've got the regular lane for the rest of us. And is that how streaming is going to go? I don't know, but Netflix is proof that you can really be successful up to a point without ads. And it'll be interesting because remember, the only thing that people looked at when Netflix reported quarterly earnings were the subscriber numbers, because that meant how much revenue they were going to get. And now they're going to have to look at ad sales, and that's just a new metric for them, right?
Yeah, we'll see if they start hiring. If keep an eye on the want ads, if they start looking for financial people and people that are experts in ad sales and that sort of thing, then they're all the way in. Okay, finally, we're going to run out of time here. The good news, the Webb telescope. Did you see the first images from that thing?
Absolutely.
I call it up on my laptop real quick and took a quick glance, and I said, oh, it kind of looks like Hubble. It's just a bunch of stars. And then I realized those were galaxies, that they're looking back 11 billion years.
Yeah, it was staggering. And, you mentioned Hubble. I love the side-by-side comparison just to see how the technology has changed and how the ability to see these things has changed in a relatively short period of time. It's amazing. Absolutely amazing.
And we're seeing galactic cliffs, and we're seeing nebula that are brilliantly shaped and colored. The universe, well, George Gamow in the early 50s says the universe is not only stranger than we think, it is stranger than we can think. And I get the feeling that the Webb telescope is going to see things that just crack our heads open. It is going to require us to rethink almost everything. And that's exciting. It's exciting we can still build that technology to quest like that to the farthest reaches of the universe.
I agree. And I would agree that was the good news of the week. Every once in a while, and we've talked about this during the pandemic, when things seem low and we, launch people into space, or in this case, see deeply into space. We saw more history than any human has ever seen in one picture. And that is phenomenal. And that's going to inspire generations of young people to say, I want to study this. I want to learn more about the universe around us. And boy, is it just bigger than we thought. It's amazing.
I hope it makes them think, I want to be out there.
Perhaps so.
Okay, so that's it for this week. That's it for now. You can find us on the Silicon Valley Business Journal homepage, as well as on Spotify, Anchor, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, LinkedIn, and of course, YouTube. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.